Every idea starts with a problem. Warby Parker's was simple. Glasses are too expensive. So they set out to change that. By designing glasses in-house and selling directly to customers, they're able to offer prescription eyewear that's expertly crafted and unexpectedly affordable. Warby Parker glasses are made from premium materials like impact-resistant polycarbonate and custom acetate. And they start at just $95, including prescription lenses. Get glasses made from the good stuff. Stop by a Warby Parker store near you.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Just a heads up, there are a couple of brief S words in this episode. You've been warned. Right off of Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, in front of a giant sculpture of some alphabet blocks, families have been gathering for months now. They're there to protest what's happening at the Children's Hospital.
Protesters are holding a rally outside Children's Hospital Los Angeles after the hospital's decision to put a pause on hormonal therapy treatments for new transgender youth patients. This comes on the...
At first, these folks were showing up to try to ensure that the gender clinic that operated here, one of the oldest and largest in the country, would stay open for new patients.
These are teachers, these are parents, and they say they are fighting for life-saving medical care.
Then it became clear they were fighting for much more than that, because this clinic was closing its doors for good.
When trans rights are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back.
We had to sit down with my daughter actually today, and it was hard. It's hard to explain that there's people in the world that don't want her to see the doctor.
Children's Hospital Los Angeles now joins a growing list of youth gender clinics that are winding down the services they offer. In New York, NYU paused and then resumed some appointments. In Illinois, one hospital canceled surgeries for anyone under 19. Another stopped prescribing hormones to minors.
A lot of these hospitals are sort of citing that their funding could be pulled, and if they lose this funding, they would have to close the hospital at large, which could mean they couldn't treat even trans adults. Or it could just mean, right, they can't treat anyone because they have no money, so they can't treat patients for, like, neurological issues, right? If they have no money across the board, if their funding gets slashed across all sectors, then they can't provide healthcare for other people.
What do you make of that? Do you buy that? Like, do you see the logic of that decision, or do you kind of think it's bullshit?
I mean, it's bullshit. It's both bullshit and not bullshit, right? Like, I understand if you're like, well, we're going to have no money and we won't be able to treat any patients, why these hospitals are doing that. But that doesn't mean it's not cowardly.
Grace Byron is a reporter who covers trans rights. She's trans herself. She says it's worth remembering that it's only been 3 years since California became the first state in the country to declare itself a sanctuary for transgender youth. But that doesn't seem to have helped anyone here. Do you feel like there is such a thing as a trans sanctuary state right now?
No, I don't think so. I think it's sort of this idea that, similar to abortion, where bodily autonomy is under attack nationally, and I think it can feel nice to feel like there are places where there perhaps are slightly more protections. But as we have seen with these clinics, I think there are people who are sort of preemptively obeying, partly because they may be afraid of losing funding.
So I've covered healthcare for a really long time. And so I feel like I've seen the whole evolution of healthcare, especially for trans kids, over the last decade or decade and a half. Like, literally 10 years ago, I was following this doctor in Chicago who was opening up one of the very first clinics for trans kids. And he was saying stuff like, I'm a champion of the underdog. He was aggressive about how he wanted to help kids with puberty blockers and hormones and surgeries. Now he's canceling surgeries. Like, the same guy who was full-throatedly defending them not that long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think like there is a big shift.
Do you worry this doesn't stop with kids?
Yeah, absolutely. They've said as much. So many politicians have said as much. In prisons all across America right now, they're forcibly detransitioning people. It's absolutely not stopping with children.
Today on the show, how the first few months of the Trump administration have turned the trans community upside down, no matter where they live. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. Wouldn't it be great to manage your portfolio on one platform? Well, now you can trade all in one place on Robinhood. That means you can trade individual stocks and ETFs and also buy and sell crypto using seriously powerful and intuitive tools at one of the lowest costs on average without needing to manage multiple apps. Robinhood makes withdrawing and depositing crypto seamless. Send crypto to your Robinhood account or send crypto from your Robinhood account to other wallets without deposit or withdrawal fees from Robinhood. Trade all in one place. Get started now on Robinhood. Trading crypto involves significant risk. Crypto trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Crypto LLC. Robinhood Crypto is licensed to engage in virtual currency business activity by the New York State Department of Financial Services. Crypto held through Robinhood Crypto is not FDIC insured or SIPC protected. Network fees may apply to crypto transfers. Crypto transfers may not be available to all customers. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Securities trading is offered through an account with Robinhood. Financial LLC, member SIPC, a registered broker-dealer. This episode is brought to you by Americans United for Separation of Church and State. The future of religious freedom is at a crossroads. The same groups behind Project 2025 are working relentlessly to impose a Christian nationalist agenda on the laws and the lives of the American people. The wall between church and state is the last safeguard standing in their way. For over 75 years, Americans United has been a powerful but quiet force fighting to preserve church-state separation, freedom without favor, and equality without exception for every single American. Americans United stands up for your right to believe and to live as you choose, so long as you don't harm others. Whether you care about gender-affirming health care, reproductive freedom, LGBTQ+ rights, or supporting public schools, church-state separation is fundamental to nearly every constitutional freedom. Americans United exists to protect that separation. You can take action and join Americans United today by donating any dollar amount, and your support will be doubled. Join Americans United and help defend the fundamental freedoms that protect us all. Learn more and join the fight at au.org/slate. au.org/slate.
To start things off, let's walk through the recent civil rights history for trans Americans. In 2016, Republicans passed HB 2 in North Carolina, the so-called bathroom bill. It required people to use a bathroom aligned with the sex on their birth certificate. And it led to a huge backlash. Musical artists canceled tour stops in the state, and the NBA relocated their All-Star game. The economic impact was measured to be a loss of $3.46 billion. And for a moment, it felt like the fight for trans civil rights might be ending. But as Republicans made inroads at the ballot box, they continued with their anti-trans crusade. Only now, instead of focusing on bathrooms, they targeted women's sports. Since 2020, 27 states have passed laws that ban transgender people from participating in sports, that are consistent with their gender identity.
Which I think had a bigger emotional appeal, was this sort of idea of like these big, strong men pretending to be women who are hurting women in sports. And that, I think, was a much more provocative and persuasive argument for a lot of people across the country. And that legislation, I think, led to a domino effect where a lot of people also started really writing about what is big trans doing to our children.
Well, it also coincided with much more medical care being available for kids.
I would push back on that.
Okay, tell me.
Yeah, I think that actually there has been a fair amount of access for trans kids for a while. I think the first clinic sort of predates a lot of this, right? A lot of kids were being treated for a long time. Most children who are trans, even now, who are getting any amount of treatment, are only receiving hormone replacement therapy or puberty blockers, right? It's very rare for them to get any kind of reconstructive surgery. So I think like that has been happening, for quite a while, for maybe decades at this point.
You don't feel like it became more visible around like...
I think it became more visible, but I don't think that's the same thing as numbers.
Got it.
I think it became more in the news, right? I think you had like Liver and Cox, the sort of quote unquote trans tipping point, where I think it became much more of a issue that people discussed and talked about. But I think like for a long time, I think trans people had been existing, but didn't face the same sort of scrutiny. I think it became a much more of a political shitstorm in 2016, 2017, 2018.
So fast forward me a little bit to, I don't know, after 2020, like 2022 or so. I feel like we're in the heart of the quote unquote debate, especially over care for kids. What was happening at the state level?
Yeah, I think that is the point that you're talking about, where you do start to see the sort of domino effect of stripping away rights, both for trans kids, but also employment rights, also discrimination rights. You also see conversion therapy bans start to get lifted. There was a lot of discussion then about, is it okay to do a sort of exploratory therapy, gender exploratory therapy, instead of doing hormones, which is often a way to try and delay transition for kids until they're 18 to sort of just talk them through things, but is often just it's conversion therapy sort of masquerading as care. So there's kind of a bunch of different ways that kids and adults start to be targeted, and these legislative issues pass, right? These things start to stack up, right? And you start to see more and more states are adapting a pretty hostile attitude towards trans people. And you slowly start to see a lot of trans families move, right? There've been small to large exoduses from Texas or Florida. I know friends who've moved from those states to sort of places like Minnesota or Seattle or New York or LA, right? In the hopes of having like a more trans-friendly legislative branch.
The attacks from state government, I felt like they were coming in a lot of different ways. Like there were straight up bans on healthcare for kids in some states. And then there were also things like Texas, the attorney general deciding to treat parents helping their kids access healthcare as child abusers. And I think it created an environment of hostility. You know, it was really kind of everywhere all at once approach.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a really great documentary that recently came out called Just Kids that sort of examined these parents who were kind of getting it from all sides. Like their doctors were saying, we legally cannot treat your kid anymore. But then if a parent tries to go out of state to get care for their child and gets hormones right, that's sort of now illegal. And that like can also be sort of scrutinized in a similar way to how they're trying to criminalize going across state lines for abortion.
So eventually the state bans go in front of the Supreme Court because there are 27 states with bans. It's a lot. And this looked specifically at Tennessee's ban. The case was U.S. v. Skrmetti. Skrmetti is the Attorney General of Tennessee. So the decision in Skrmetti, which allowed Tennessee's ban for trans healthcare for kids to move forward, I feel like it acted as a catalyst almost for clinics around the country to sort of see that decision and also see the Trump administration empowered and act out of fear Can you just describe, in the wake of that decision, given the fact that the Trump administration was running the show at DOJ, did it act as a kind of accelerant to clinics around the country?
Absolutely. Yes.
How so?
I think that already before the discriminated decision came down, people were terrified of the legal repercussions and financial repercussions of treating trans kids, even in states like New York and California. And I think that the sort of decision to stop treating trans kids was a sort of attempt to circumvent a loss of funding and a loss of the sort of political scrutiny that they could have faced had they gone on in the current climate.
Yeah.
I do think, yes, that like a lot more clinics will probably close soon. And I also think it's coinciding with an attack on trans healthcare with the Big Beautiful Bill that ultimately went back and forth on whether or not it was going to try to ban trans healthcare for insurance plans. Ultimately, that did not happen, but
the House passed this version of the bill that had a ban for trans healthcare, I believe, for Medicaid recipients.
It was for Medicaid recipients, but it would also strip medical care for trans people as a requirement of ACA health plans.
So it removed it as a civil right, which had been put in place in the wake of the Affordable Care Act. But then it was stripped from the bill by the Senate.
Yes, the final version, yes.
When that happened, was it a relief for you? Were you like, phew, dodged?
I don't think so. I think that it is very clear that insurance plans can, will, and could use dropping trans people from their plans as a way to save money. I think there are plenty of Republicans who still would sort of like to enact some sort of like austerity on trans healthcare as a way to both save money but also attack bodily autonomy. And I think in a similar way, you see hospitals closing wings. You know, that's an easy way to save money if you're on the brink, is to just say we're not going to do that anymore because it's too controversial.
Yeah, I mean, something that's been happening just over the last few weeks that caught my attention was the Department of Justice subpoenaing clinics and doctors, basically accusing people who offer trans health care of being involved with what the administration is calling female genital mutilation, which is very extreme language. But this seeking of information and records, it was really... it reminded me of what's happening in the migrant community when it comes to scouring food stamp data and Medicaid data with an explicit goal of identifying people and using that to remove them from the country. Now, that language is not being used for trans people right now. But all of these things are happening at once. And I think that's where the fear enters in for an observer like myself.
Absolutely. I also wrote a piece about the trans passport executive orders, and there was a lot of fear then because there was, at first, people were like, well, how will they know if, for instance, someone has changed all of their documents? How will they know that I'm trans? And so how could they issue me a passport with an incorrect gender marker? Well, people found out that they were cross-referencing documents with multiple databases in order to decide what gender marker to put on someone's passport. So even people who had potentially had all of their documents changed and updated for years could find themselves getting a passport with an incorrect gender marker. So, and that's pretty terrifying to be like, oh, there is an amount of surveillance happening here, even if it is dysfunctional and kind of rickshaw, that sometimes they are able to sort of identify people who are trans in some sort of a way nationally.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
She's made up her mind to live pretty smart. Learn to budget responsibly right from the start. She spends a little less and puts more into savings. Keeps her blood pressure low and credit score raises. She's cutting debt right out of her life. Her cash flow on a spreadsheet at night.
Boring money moves make kind of lame songs, but they sound pretty sweet to your wallet. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
It's interesting because you and I started out discussing clinics for trans kids. We're now basically discussing trans adults and trans people more generally. Can you just explain, I know the clinics for trans kids are closing, but maybe talk to me a little bit about how life for trans adults is changing right now.
Yeah, I definitely have talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people, I think, are trying to find other sources for hormones. They're trying to find where to plug in a communal way, in a DIY way.
Are people looking for care outside of doctors right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that partially just because you don't want a paper trail?
I don't know if it's necessarily just because you don't want a paper trail. I think it's because one stream, one source is going to shut down. So what you have to sort of prepare for eventuality of what happens if trans healthcare at large is illegal across the states? I think people are really considering that possibility right now. And I also think if your insurance doesn't cover something, you're also going to have to find an alternative way to get care. Because if you can't afford thousands of dollars to pay for something out of pocket, even if there is a doctor who maybe is willing to prescribe something, you're going to have to find a different way.
Can you put me inside that right now? Because I'm not inside it. What does that look like? Does that look like Facebook groups? Does that look like meetups in your community? Does that look like a telephone tree? I just don't know.
I think no one is talking about that on the record for good reason. DIY HRT has existed for the entire time that HRT and hormone replacement therapy has happened, and I think will continue. And even before the Trump administration, that was something that was certainly happening. But yeah, it's small, it's local, and I think it's tricky.
I mean, there was trans healthcare before there was trans healthcare writ large,
Yeah.
What would it mean to go back to the trans healthcare of the 60s, 70s? I'm not sure how you would frame it.
Sometimes people would lie to doctors. They would say that they were intersex in order to get care. Sometimes people would find other trans people sort of living on the street and be like, where are you getting your care and your HRT? Plenty of people got Botox and plastic surgery. And I think that people had to sort of, through whisper networks, find these things, which is so much harder, I think, especially if you're isolated.
Yeah. Part of what I really appreciate about your writing about the trans community right now is I think you draw this important connection that I don't see being drawn a lot of other places, which is basically that what the trans community is experiencing right now is actually a more extreme version of what's happening generally in this administration when it comes to surveillance, when it comes to healthcare. Can you just explain that connection a bit? Because I think it can be powerful for people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think that there is often a way that transness gets to be this sort of abstract or siloed issue, when in reality, I think that the fight for bodily autonomy and material rights is something that all of us are seeking. And I think that that sort of repressive political game that's being played is coming for everyone across the board, right? I think that the attempt to strip away healthcare from trans people is part of a larger move to sort of de-center and strip and get healthcare for all, right? I think the Big Beautiful Bill is a really good example of that. This attempt to sort of make sure that less and less people are able to get on Medicaid and less people are able to access healthcare. And I think in a similar way, with surveillance, right, trans people are really being surveilled in bathrooms and with these passport issues and with who's going to what doctor, right? I think that's happening to plenty of people right now across the board. It's happening to immigrants. It's happening to people who are arguing for a free Palestine. It's happening to people who are in Stop Cop City, right? All of these sort of different movements against political repression, those are all being heavily surveyed and then tried in court.
Yeah, I really see when you look at, for instance, a lot of what RFK Jr. is doing at the Department of Health and Human Services, when you look at the big, beautiful bill, so-called, I see this obsession with the natural state of the body. And it's the preferred state, even if that natural state fails you, like you get sick. It's kind of like, why wasn't your natural state good enough? I don't know. Like, I think people look at, for instance, the MAHA movement, like, well, it's about things that I agree with, less dyes in food or whatever. But it's about fundamentally something else, which is like, stop messing with yourself because you're perfect, but also that might mean that you like die early,
Yeah.
It's nihilistic.
Absolutely. There's a sort of like naturalist argument and sort of argument against like changing the body, right? Whether that is like vaccines or surgery or prosthetics or living with a disability, right? All of these things are sort of seen as wrong or like weak-willed or against God or against nature, right? When in reality, I think like that's a really reductive way to think about health, right? Which is something that, right, is anyone ever really healthy? I think is maybe a better framing, and that our bodies are quite elastic and change over time, and that getting sick or getting ill is like a natural part of life. And I think it's scary to sort of say that's eugenics, right? Essentially, that eventually turns into eugenics, this argument that like, there is one way the body should be, which is untouched, unblemished, right? I think that can quickly change into race science.
It's interesting to me that in this moment, the fight over bathrooms is back. Because it seems to me like we kind of settled it like a decade ago. We decided we didn't want to mess with that. And now all of a sudden, now that we're attacking trans healthcare, we're slipping in the attacks on bathrooms too. I mean, you can see it in Congress with the idea that somehow trans legislators can't use the bathrooms that align with their gender identity. Why, for you, is the fight over bathrooms so important?
The criminalization of trans people in bathrooms is not just about bathrooms. It's about sort of criminalizing trans people in public space, right? Because if you can't go to the bathroom at your job, if you can't go to the bathroom when you're on the trip, when you're walking around the park, right? I think like that's a pretty scary place to be, right? If you're like, I have to pee, right? It's this sort of, you should not have a body, right? And if you do have a body like this, it should not be here, right? Go somewhere else. But a lot of people can't go somewhere else. A lot of people need to work, right? Whether you're a congresswoman or you're a grocery store worker or whoever, right? So I think that to me, it's really a dangerous attack on the ability of people to move in public space.
Can I ask a personal question?
Sure.
How are you doing?
I think that being a reporter allows me to have a little bit more of a colder, stoic stance, to sort of try and see where things are. But of course, I'm terrified of losing my healthcare. Of course, I'm terrified. Like, I've been on Medicaid before. A lot of my friends have been on Medicaid, and it has been life-saving. And even if currently the Big Beautiful Bill is not taking away our care, it does seem like it's only a matter of time before at least the threat of that comes back. And I know a lot of trans kids, and I feel really terrified for them and wish that they were living in a place where they could be safe.
Grace, I'm really grateful for your time and your reporting. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me so much.
Grace Byron is a writer who has been covering life for trans Americans for The New Yorker. If you are liking what you hear in our feed, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to Slate Plus. When you do, you get access to our Super Fun Plus only episodes and a whole bunch of others from the rest of the Slate podcast universe. You can go check out last week's Plus episode from our sister show, What Next TBD. It is right there in our feed, but only if you're a subscriber. It's all about the Coldplay Kiss Cam couple. You know them. You talked about them. Go hear Lizzie O'Leary and 404 Media's Jason Kebler arguing about this case. Kebler says the doxing these two got, it should never have happened. To hear more, go to slate.com/whatnextplus. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Ethan Oberman, and Madeline Ducharme. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky and say, hey, I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.